Hey gang, Chris here from Ecoustics. Just got back from an Epson event at ProjectorScreen.com's headquarters in New Jersey, where Epson was showing off the projectors in their Q-series lineup. These are home theater projectors with very high brightness, from the QB1000 at 3300 lumens to the QL3000 with 6000 lumens, and the flagship QL7000 with 10,000 lumens. And why would you ever need 10,000 lumens for a home theater projector? Well, I'm glad you asked, because if you have really large screens, say 300 inches, sometimes the light output from a standard traditional home theater projector is just not enough to fill that big screen with light and color. And also if you've got any kind of ambient room lighting, maybe you've got drapes that you don't always want to close during the day, or you've got high lighting, or you want to watch a football game with people in the room with you without having to, trip over yourselves when you get up to get snacks. So there are definitely some situations where the extra brightness, the 6,000 or 10,000 lumens, comes in handy. And Rob Brennan from Epson goes into some detail as to why you might want one over another. Sometimes the 3300 lumens of the QB1000, or even the 2700 lumens of the LS12000 projector, another 4K projector from Epson, sometimes that's plenty if you're in a darkened home theater. So save a bit of money, maybe put a little extra money into the sound system, and don't waste it on lumens that you may not need. But in the cases where you do need them, Epson showed that their projectors can put out really bright, colorful images, even in bright lighting conditions. Now, at the event, we got to see comparisons between the Epson projectors and some home theater projectors from Sony and JVC. And I have to say the Epsons definitely held their own in the black levels, but I would say easily exceeded the performance of the competition in terms of peak brightness and the dynamics of the image. Again, in certain lighting conditions on certain content. Definitely not throwing shade at JVC and Sony. They make some amazing projectors. But Epson made a pretty compelling case about when more lumens is better. We didn't get to include the comparisons against the competitors in this video. Sadly, they didn't want to get in trouble for that. But we do have some comparisons of Epson projectors versus other Epson projectors, including the LS12000, QB1000, QL3000, and QL7000. So if you're curious what the differences are between the various Epson projectors this year, check out the video and stay tuned to the end for that comparison. And let us know what you think in the comments.
Well, welcome everyone and good afternoon. My name is Rob Brennan. I'm the Technical Account Manager with Epson, and we're here today to take a look at Epson's lineup of high-performance projectors with a special emphasis on the new Q series, although we'll have an opportunity to take a look at the entire lineup, starting with the LS models all the way through our flagship QL7000. Before we get into showing you the side-by-side comparisons, which is what we really want to get into today, I want to talk a little bit about what the Q series is designed to do, how it's really pushing back against kind of the industry norms and moving the industry forward, especially when it comes to high dynamic range video performance. So the Q series represents the kind of the latest and greatest from Epson in terms of high brightness models. There are three models that fall into the Q series from Epson. These include the QB1000, the QL3000, and the QL7000. The primary difference from a high level perspective in terms of chassis design is that the QB1000 is an integrated lens projector, meaning that the lens is built in. One size fits all. There's plenty of zoom and shift and everything that you need to install the projector in most spaces with lots of flexibility. However, the QL3000 and QL7000 are unique in that they come in an interchangeable lens chassis. Essentially, there are a dozen different lenses that can be specified with those projectors, depending on the unique installation characteristics, from ultra short or very long installations. So regardless of the size of your room, chances are we can find a solution for you. Now, what makes the Q series so unique is a couple of things. First and foremost, from Epson's perspective, this is the first time Epson has offered projectors at these price points and at these performance levels. So with the QB1000, we're delivering 3,300 lumens of color and white brightness for $8,000. In the QL3000, it's 6,000 lumens, again, of both white and color brightness, for $16,000 plus whichever lens is appropriate for the installation. And then finally, the QL7000, 10,000 lumens of performance at $33,000 plus, again, one of the dozen or so lenses. From a feature set perspective, the projectors are largely the same. They're all 4K. They're all laser-based, 3-chip, 3 LCD. They support HDR10. They support hybrid log gamma. They're great for gaming. They have our new Q series processors, the QZX processor. It's really a question of what is the right level of brightness that you need based on your application, or more specifically, how large is your screen and how bright is your room. In addition, rounding out the rest of the lineup is the LS models. So the LS12000 has been in the Epson lineup for a number of years. It is joined now with the LS9000, which was introduced last August. The LS12000 and 9000 have the exact same chassis as the QB1000. And as far as comparing the two LS models, the difference here is just a question of brightness. So we have 2200 lumens of brightness for $4,000 in the LS9000 and 2700 lumens of brightness for $6,000 in the LS12000. The only other difference is that as part of our old kind of go-to-market strategy, the LS12000 being the oldest model in the lineup, a mount is included with purchase. So that includes all the mounting hardware, mounting a bracket interface, mounting plate for the projector itself, the universal mount, a 6-inch drop pipe, and a ceiling bracket is all included. The entire lineup looks a little bit like this. So you can see, ranked now by brightness, Epson offers a very wide range of solutions, not only depending on the specific needs of a particular customer, given the size of the screen that they're trying to light up or the ambient conditions they're trying to punch through, starting at 2200 lumens and capping out at 10,000 lumens. And then you can also see the price points for those various outputs. The only model I didn't really talk about because it is somewhat unique, although ultra short throw is very popular still, but very different in terms of the overall design and application, is the QS100. This is Epson's ultra short throw projector that is designed for the custom integration channel. So if you're looking for an ultra short throw projector that is compatible with all of the major control partners, that can be ISF calibrated, that meets kind of all the requirements in terms of high brightness, large screen sizes up to 160 inch, the QS100 is available. Several of these chassis are also available in either white or black. And you can see those are listed here from the QB1000 up to the QL7000. So the question really becomes, okay, Epson has these high brightness projectors, and I guess brightness is great and all, but is it just about brighter is brighter, or is there some other benefit to going with a high brightness solution? And there are really three advantages and reasons why you want to consider high brightness in your projector. These include improved picture quality, especially and critically for viewing high dynamic range video, the ability to light up a larger screen. This is especially important in kind of the modern 2026 era, where you can go get nearly 100-inch television for quite frankly, a shockingly affordable price. So if we want to be able to talk about projection as the true large screen viewing experience, we need enough brightness to empower well north of 100 inches, right? And then lastly, if you have enough brightness, you can deploy a projector inside of non-conventional spaces. I don't just want to be able to talk to clients and customers about projection if they have a dedicated room that's painted dark gray or painted black and they've boarded up their windows. We want to be able to introduce projection to a wide range of clients, regardless of their environmental considerations, and brightness is how we do that. But let's focus mostly on HDR video. So the first question is, how much brightness do we need? And for that, we can refer to the Digital Cinema Initiative. This is an organization that basically is made up of Hollywood, and they get together and they decide how movies are going to be made. And this group is important because while companies like the Walt Disney Company and Warner Brothers may compete when it comes to IP or on securing contracts with directors or actors or who's going to win the box office this coming Friday, they also work together to create movies, right? There are lots of partnerships that also exist. And so this organization is not the same as THX or not the same as the Society of Motion Picture and TV Engineers or SMPTE. This organization doesn't make recommendations. They decide how are we going to make movies and distribute movies, and how are we going to exhibit movies professionally moving forward. So about 2 years ago, they introduced a new standard that calls for lots of things, but specific to the conversation here, in terms of high brightness, they are calling for 299.6 candescents per square meter, which is the fancy way of saying nits. So I hate decimals. We're going to call this 300 nits plus or minus 30 nits, 10%, right? So what they're calling for movies, for HDR, for the correct viewing experience, is somewhere between 270 nits of on-screen brightness and 330 nits of on-screen brightness. What's really powerful about this is that until this point, there hasn't been a standard from any organization. There's been tribal knowledge, there's been opinions, and there's been preferences that have existed around how much brightness do you need for large format HDR viewing, but there's no one that we can point to that says, this is an organization that says this is the correct way it should be done, and this is an organization worth listening to. DCI represents this type of guidance. Additionally, coming soon, CEDIA is currently working on a new standard, RP23. Now, some of you may be familiar with RP22, which was the audio standard, had 4 levels for the correct way to design audio for, high performance experiences for customers. The same thing is being done now for video. So RP23 for immersive video design is going to, amongst other things, adopt the DCI standard as part of its recommendations for immersive video design. So this idea of high brightness for HDR is not coming from Epson, although Epson is certainly a champion of it. This is where the industry is moving, and it is important for the right kind of viewing experience. Let's talk about the numbers real quick. I happen to have in front of you 2 identical screens. These are 135-inch screens from Stewart Film Screen, and the material I've skinned them with is Phantom Haler Plus with a gain of 1.3. So with these exact screens in mind, so I've done the math here for you, 135-inch screen, 16 by 9, with a gain of 1.3. How much on-screen brightness can we produce with the Epson Q series? The QB1000 will produce approximately 272 nits, 2 nits brighter than my bottom end, right? Getting to my DCI standard of 300 nits plus, or in this case, minus 30 nits. The QL6000, which right now is on the screen on the right-hand side, is delivering 494 nits, so nearly 500. And then on the left-hand screen here, we have the QL7000 that's producing 823 nits. So these levels of brightness are absolutely achievable. They're achievable at very large screen sizes and are going to enable us to empower truly impactful HDR viewing experiences for our clients. Now, one of the things that I also want to talk about very quickly is color performance and color accuracy, because brightness in and of itself is not the point, right? Just having a brighter image might be, kind of arresting for the average kind of consumer and viewer. Something that's brighter is more kind of energetic and interesting, and it's going to draw the eye. But from a creator perspective, from a filmmaker perspective, brightness is a vehicle to deliver color. So I want to talk a little bit about color performance. These are some test results that were done independent. I worked with Jason Dustel and Michael Hamilton, both from ISF, and asked them to take measurements of the Epson Q series out of the box and also post-calibration. Now, the numbers here I'm showing specifically are for the QL7000. As a 10,000 lumen high brightness projector, I think it's fair to say that that projector would be the more difficult one to kind of calibrate and wrangle, right? 10,000 lumens in a compact chassis can be kind of like a tornado, right? Here's what they found. Out of the box, using the 255 color checker test, the average delta error was 1.45, right? In natural mode, which as far as Epson land is concerned, of the 4 picture modes in the Q series projectors, natural mode is going to be your most color accurate out of the box. Now, for those of you not super familiar with calibration, I'll explain this very quickly. Delta error refers to how large your error is. So this is the Greek delta, as in difference or distance. So a delta error of 0 would mean no error, right? That would be perfection. So 1.45 as an average delta error is excellent. The goal with calibration is to have your delta error be less than 3. 3 is the threshold for human perception. So delta error is under 3. We can't perceive with our eyes, although your meter will tell you there's a problem, your brain and your eyes are going to think that it's great. So out of the box, excellent performance. We always still encourage calibration to get the most out of your viewing experience, if you'd like to do that as well. Compact and quiet is also important. It doesn't do us any good to have a super bright projector but in a noisy chassis, making it only usable to clients who are willing to build or already have a projectionist booth or some kind of sound isolation room for the projectors. So what I have here on screen for you is basically the fan noise ceiling in both max laser output and in eco mode. But of course, this is an interesting number, right? But ultimately, if you're going to buy a 33 or 6,000 or 10,000 lumen projector, use all of it, right? Let's go. That's what I'm talking about. But you can see 32 decibels here for the QB1000, 28 decibels for the QL3000, and 33 decibels for the QL7000. So it's fair to say that these projectors could be classified as whisper quiet, 30 decibels being the sound of a low whisper in something like a library. So these projectors can be deployed in normal humans living spaces, whether it's hanging directly over you or on a shelf in the back of your room. They're not going to be so loud as to distract from the content that you're enjoying, whether it's movies, video games, live sports, etc. So high brightness in a compact and quiet chassis and running off of standard power. So no high voltage requirements. We also introduced a new processor, the QZX picture processor, to the Q series projectors. And it does improve a lot of the technologies that Epson previously implemented with our other projectors, like the LS12000 and the LS9000. However, the new technology that I think is the most exciting and interesting is dynamic tone mapping. So I already talked a little bit about HDR and how you need high levels of brightness for impactful HDR, which now we have. But we also need to know what to do with that high brightness. Just because we have this innate ability doesn't automatically mean success. So this is the brain that controls our capability. So the Q series has great dynamic range because of the high brightness, and now can make the best decisions with what to do with all of that dynamic range. As far as the interchangeable lens projectors are concerned, the QL3000 and the QL7000, the lenses are designed, built, and manufactured by Epson in Japan. They are all glass. They are all motorized. Now, not all of the lenses are motorized with all of the same flexibility. For example, the ultra short throw interchangeable lens has lens shift, but they cannot zoom. The other lenses all have motorized shift, focus, and zoom. And there are a dozen lenses or so that you can spec with the Epson QL, again, from ultra short throw all the way out to very long throw lenses are available within the lineup. So at Epson, when we talk about reimagining projection, this isn't about really changing what projectors are in terms of how they're built, right? There's lasers, there's 3-chip LCDs, there's fans, there's HDMI inputs. We haven't changed kind of the recipe. But by taking advantage of Epson's expertise in high brightness and in compact design, system design, we're encouraging our customers, right, our dealers, integrators, to reimagine where they deploy projectors, what a projector can deliver at the end of the day, and what kind of viewing experiences projectors ultimately can provide. So with that being said, we'll jump into some side-by-side comparisons. You'll get a chance to see exactly what it is that we're talking about. So in this first comparison, what we have on the left-hand side is the LS12000 being compared to the QB1000 on the right-hand side. I wanted to start with this comparison because the LS12000 has been a staple in Epson's lineup for a number of years. It's wildly popular. A lot of people made the plunge and purchased this projector. And on the right-hand side, the QB1000 represents a nice uptick in terms of overall performance, not only because of the increased brightness output, but also the better brain, again, the QZX processor for dynamic tone mapping. Because it's not enough to just have better capability, it's about making better decisions with that capability in and of itself. So as we're looking at this content, there are a few different clips in here. It's all kind of scrubbed through so you can get a few different looks. We're looking obviously at a lot of solid black, right? As well as fairly bright, but also very color saturated content. So you can kind of see how these ultimately kind of wrap out against each other. Now, depending on how your cameras are set up, these are both ALR screens. So as long as we're shooting relatively in the center, you should have a relatively good video capture experience. Both of these screens are designed primarily to be viewed kind of 100% head on. Now this, of course, is some CG created content. We also have within the same clip, I'm just going to scrub forward here, we also have content that is actually just naturally caught and graded at different brightness levels. So we'll be able to see as this plays through, these different levels are going to increase as this moves, I believe, all the way up to 10,000 nits of gradation. So one of the things, of course, that's going to happen as we go brighter is you're going to see increased levels of white clipping. That's just a byproduct of HDR viewing, but the ability for the brighter projector to maintain more of the color saturation as we move through these various levels of brightness is one of the things that's unique of high dynamic range capability, as well as better processing. And same kind of clip, you can see this is graded at 2,000 nits, and this will move up several times as well. Again, both of these projectors are still relatively close to each other in terms of general performance. The difference is only 600 lumens. So you have a little bit of a bump in the overall dynamic range capability and then the better processing. When we get into the QL models, we start talking about much larger changes in overall not only dynamic range capability, they'll have the same brain, but significant changes in overall performance.
And Rob, dynamic tone mapping is on?
Dynamic tone mapping is on.
On both?
Okay.
Both projectors are in cinema mode.
Okay.
Which is the default mode. The only adjustment I have made from out of the box is that these projectors are not set up to run at 100% light output out of the box.
Okay.
The LS12000 out of the box in cinema mode only runs at 50% brightness, so I've moved it from 50 to 100. And the QB1000 runs at 85% brightness, which I've also moved to 100. So one of the things you'll see in this particular scene, I hope your cameras can capture this, but you see the color of the decking here. So even though the LS12000 isn't as bright, I'm losing color saturation as we go brighter in that kind of, call it teak decking. I don't know if it's teak. I don't know if that's expensive enough or maybe too expensive for just a random, kind of dock. But that is a byproduct of tone mapping. In this case, static tone mapping. So it's making a tone mapping decision for the entire piece of content. So as we go brighter, right, we're not dynamically readjusting to maintain as much of that color information as possible because the brightness on the decking is not nearly the brightest part of the screen. So it's not the first place you would assume to lose color. On the QB1000 on the right, with dynamic tone mapping and more dynamic range, I can maintain the color of that wood regardless of the gradation of the scene.
And it's only the LS9000 that lacks dynamic tone mapping, correct?
No, the LS9000 and the LS12000 both are static tone mapping.
Okay.
So again, this comparison is static tone mapping on the left, dynamic tone mapping on the right.
Okay.
Because it has a QX.
Because it has the QZX processor. So let me switch over and now show you what we're talking about when we get into high levels of brightness. On the left-hand side, we have the QL7000, 10,000 lumens. And on the right-hand side, we have the QL3000 at 6,000 lumens. Both projectors, again, are out of the box in their cinema mode. But both these projectors out of the box are run at 100% laser output. So I don't need to make any modification there in terms of their brightness.
And the chassis are pretty much identical, right?
The chassis are identical, and the feature set is identical. There's no feature that is exclusive to either projector. The difference is just in the laser output, 6,000 lumens versus 10,000 lumens, and then 28 decibels at the lower lumen, QL3000, versus 33 decibels, QL7000. So 5 decibel difference, a 4,000 lumen difference, and then $17,000 retail. $16,000 becomes $33,000.
Same processor, same dynamic
Same
tone
exact processor,
Right.
exactly, same everything else. When I look at these projectors, it really becomes the right tool for the job. If you wanted to say, well, one is more expensive, so it's clearly the flagship, more lumens is always better because it gives you more flexibility. And those would all be, true statements. It does give you more flexibility. There are certainly going to be applications where 6,000 lumens is more than sufficient or 10,000 lumens becomes absolutely necessary. So for me, this is the right tool for the right job, which is a question of, how large is the screen and what are the ambient conditions that you're kind of actively dealing with. The other advantage, in my opinion, of using high brightness projectors, maybe even a brighter projector than you technically need, is that then you could run the projector at a lower laser output to bring the fan noise down. They're already quiet, but you can make it quieter. By running the fan noise or running the laser at a lower output, you're reducing the heat, which also can extend its life. And then lastly, we've all had this experience as people who watch projectors, especially if you have a projector that's just barely bright enough for your given environment, right? Sometimes you don't want to watch with the lights off. Maybe sometimes you want to get together and watch sports with friends, right? We have World Cup soccer coming in the very near future. You're going to have family over or friends over, sit in the theater room. No one wants to watch football in your theater room with the lights turned off, right? They want to know where the snacks are. They want to get up and go to the restroom and come back. And so the ability to have we'll call it a calibrated movie nighttime watching and a bright daytime lights on viewing experience is compelling. And with extra brightness, you can have these additional viewing experiences based on dynamic viewing conditions and changing needs based on the content that you happen to be watching at the time. This is a very long answer to say feature set between the two is identical.
Yeah. And 16,000 versus 32,000, roughly.
Yes, 16,000 versus 33,000.
33, sure.
Versus 33,000. And again, that price does not include the lens. 12 different lenses that you can spec from ultra short to quite long.
But the only alternatives in the 10,000 lumen range are generally much bigger and much more expensive.
Yeah, generally for 10,000 lumens, you're looking at projectors that are much larger, much louder because they're much hotter. They may require, and they often do require, high voltage, and they can also be much more expensive.
Right.
What Epson is ultimately offering is high brightness in a compact, chassis, quiet operation, standard power, and generally less costly than other solutions.
Right.
That's not to say those other solutions don't have their own unique characteristics that are interesting or even beneficial, but ultimately we think that more clients, more customers, more dealers will have the ability to purchase or install projectors from Epson because of the unique combination of performance and size and cost than ever before.